under the blazing noon sun of Liberty Park. A single glance turned a moment of peace into a clash of prejudice, setting off a chain reaction that would shake a city to its core. Jamal Carter sat on a weathered bench beneath the sprawling branches of an old oak, his pencil moving deftly across the pages of a worn sketchbook. The park buzzed with life. Children shrieked as they chased kites. Joggers pounded the winding paths, and vendors called out, their voices mingling with the scent of grilled hot dogs and blooming jasmine. Jamal, a black man in his late 30s, wore faded jeans and a plain gray t-shirt, his lean frame relaxed as he captured the scene. A child's kite soaring against the azure sky, its red tail fluttering like a heartbeat. As a DEA agent, his days were filled with high-stakes operations, navigating the shadows of drug cartels and informants. But here, in Liberty Park, he was just a man with a pencil, finding solace in the simple act of creation. The park was his sanctuary, where the weight of his badge didn't press so heavily, where he could breathe without the constant hum of danger in his ears. He adjusted his position, the bench creaking beneath him, and shaded in the kite's tail, unaware that across the park, a pair of eyes had locked onto him with suspicion across the park. Officer Daniel Walsh strode through Liberty Park with the confidence of a man who believed he owned the ground beneath his feet. 25 years on the force had carved deep lines into his weathered face, his blue eyes sharp and unyielding as they scanned the crowd. His uniform was crisp, the badge on his chest glinting in the sunlight, symbolizing authority he wore like armor. Walsh had walked this beat for over a decade, and in his mind, he knew every inch of this city, its rhythms, its dangers, its people. Or so he thought. His gaze landed on Jamal, alone on the bench, pencil moving with a focus that seemed too deliberate, too out of place. A black man, sitting alone, too calm, too composed. Something about it stirred an itch in Walsh's gut, a feeling he'd learned to trust over years of patrolling. There'd been reports of a drug dealer in the area. Male, black, medium build, early 30s to 40s. The description was vague, a flimsy thread of a lead, but it was enough for Walsh. He adjusted his belt, feeling the weight of his holster, and muttered under his breath, "Never seen him around here before." His boots crunched on the gravel, path as he started toward the bench, his mind already weaving a narrative of suspicion. Jamal felt the weight of the stare before he saw it. It was a sensation he knew too well, one that had followed him since he was a teenager walking home from school, or later as an agent working undercover in neighborhoods where his skin made him a target before he could open his mouth. He looked up from his sketchbook, his dark eyes meeting Walsh's across the park. The officer's expression was unmistakable, a mix of scrutiny and judgment, prejudice, masquerading as vigilance. Jamal sighed, setting his pencil down and closing the sketchbook, marking the page with a finger. He'd been here before, too, many times. The park, usually a haven, now felt like a stage, with eyes turning toward him from nearby picnickers and joggers. Among them was Elena Torres, a 17-year-old with a phone in hand, filming the park for a school documentary project. Her curly hair bounced as she tilted her head, sensing something brewing. She whispered to her friend, "Leela, why's that cop staring at him like that?" Leela shrugged, but Mia kept her phone trained on the scene, her instincts telling her to keep recording. Walsh stopped a few feet from the bench, his posture rigid, one hand resting casually but deliberately on his baton. "Afternoon," he said, his voice clipped, carrying an edge that belied the polite greeting. "What are you doing here?" Jamal met his gaze, his expression neutral, his voice calm. "Sketching," he replied, gesturing to the notebook in his lap. "It's a nice day for it." Walsh's eyes flicked to the sketchbook, then back to Jamal's face, searching for something to latch on to. The man's calmness unsettled him. Too steady, too unafraid. "Mind if I see some ID?" Walsh asked, his tone sharpening. Jamal's jaw tightened, but he kept his composure, his hands visible on the closed sketchbook. He'd been through this dance before, the unwarranted demand, the assumption of guilt, the expectation of compliance. He knew his rights and knew he wasn't obligated to show ID just for sitting in a public park, but he also knew the risks of refusal. "Am I under arrest?" he asked, his voice steady, his eyes locked on Walsh's without flinching. The question caught Walsh off guard, and he bristled, his hand shifting to his holster. "You will be if you don't cooperate," he snapped. "ID, now!" Mia, standing a short distance away, zoomed in with her phone, her heart racing. "This isn't right," she whispered to Lila, who nodded nervously. The tension was palpable now, drawing the attention of others in the park. A mother pushing a stroller, a jogger slowing his pace, a vendor pausing mid-transaction. Jamal weighed his options. He could pull out his DEA badge and end this now, but that wasn't the point. He shouldn't have to flash a badge to be treated like a human being. Slowly, deliberately, he reached into his back pocket, pulling out his wallet and extracting his driver's license. He handed it to Walsh, his movements careful, his eyes never leaving the officers. Walsh snatched the ID, scanning the name, Jamal Carter. It meant nothing to him, but it didn't need to. His mind was already made up, the vague description from the report solidifying into certainty. "Stand up," he ordered, pulling a pair of handcuffs from his belt. "You're coming with me." "For what?" Jamal asked, rising slowly from the bench, keeping his hands visible. "I'm just sitting in a park." "You fit a description," Walsh said, his voice tight, though even he knew how weak the excuse sounded. "Turn around." Jamal's frustration surged, but he pushed it down, turning as instructed. The cold metal of the cuffs snapped around his wrists, biting into his skin. Mia's camera captured it all. The way Walsh's grip tightened, the murmurs of onlookers, the flash of controlled anger in Jamal's eyes as he was restrained. "This is wrong," Mia muttered, her fingers trembling as she kept filming. A small crowd was forming now, whispers rippling through the park. "He wasn't doing anything," someone said. "Why's he being cuffed?" another voice asked. As Walsh led Jamal towards the patrol car parked at the edge of the park, Jamal spoke, his voice low but firm. "I'm a DEA agent. You're making a mistake." Walsh froze mid-step, his grip on Jamal's arm tightening. "Atsbeyi, DEA agent." The words hit like a punch, but his pride wouldn't let him back down. Not now, not in front of the growing crowd, not when he'd already committed. "We'll see about that," he muttered, shoving Jamal toward the car. The door slammed shut behind him, and Jamal settled into the back seat, the cuffs digging into his wrists. He looked out the window, watching the park blur past. The kites, the children, the life he'd been part of. Moments ago now replaced by the cold reality of this moment. Mia, still filming, uploaded the video to her social media, her fingers flying over the screen as she typed, "This is wrong. Cop arrests man for nothing. 'Tis justice for a Jamal." By the time Walsh's patrol car pulled away, the clip was already gaining traction, shared by dozens, then hundreds across the city. Comments poured in. "This is why we don't trust cops." He was just sitting there. Racial profiling again. The video spread like wildfire, igniting outrage that would soon reach the steps of the precinct. Inside the patrol car, Walsh's knuckles were white on the steering wheel, his mind racing. The DEA agent claim gnawed at him, but he pushed it aside. He'd seen plenty of people lie to get out of trouble. Yet Jamal's calmness, his unflinching gaze in the rearview mirror, unsettled him. "What were you doing in that park?" Walsh asked, his voice edged with suspicion. "I told you," Jamal replied, meeting Walsh's eyes in the mirror. "I was sketching," Walsh scoffed. "A guy like you, just sketching? You expect me to believe that?" Jamal raised an eyebrow, his tone measured. "A guy like me? What's that supposed to mean, officer?" Walsh hesitated, realizing the slip in his words, but doubled down. "You don't look like someone who spends their afternoons sketching in a park," he said, his voice defensive, as if justifying his actions to himself. Jamal let the silence stretch, the tension in the car sickening. "And what does someone like me look like?" he asked quietly, his words cutting through the air like a blade. Walsh didn't answer, his jaw tightening as he focused on the road. The precinct loomed ahead, a squat brick building surrounded by squad cars and a growing crowd of protesters, some already holding signs. Mia's video had done its work, and the city was waking up. Walsh parked, his movements stiff, and opened the back door, guiding Jamal out. The cuffs bit deeper as they walked toward the entrance, the chants of the crowd, "No justice, no peace," ringing in their ears. Inside the precinct, the air was thick with a hum of activity, phones ringing, officers typing reports, the usual chaos of a busy day. But there was an undercurrent of tension, a sense that something was off. Officer Sarah Lin, a rookie just 3 months into her tenure, stood near the booking desk, her dark hair pulled into a tight bun, her uniform still stiff with newness. She'd been in the park earlier on her lunch break and had seen Walsh approach Jamal. Something about it had felt wrong, but she hadn't intervened, unsure if it was her place. Now, as Walsh led Jamal through the main hall, Sarah's stomach twisted. She caught Jamal's eye for a moment, his expression unreadable but calm, and felt a pang of guilt. Had she been complicit by staying silent? Walsh signaled for Jamal to stand by the processing desk, where Officer Jenkins, a young man with a nervous energy, looked up. "What's this about?" Jenkins asked, his eyes flicking to Jamal, then back to Walsh. "Caught him acting suspicious in the park," Walsh replied, his tone clipped, handing over Jamal's ID. "Wouldn't cooperate." Jenkins glanced at the ID, then at Jamal, a flicker of recognition in his eyes. He'd heard of Jamal Carter, rumors of a DEA agent working major cases in the city, but he masked it, typing into the computer. "Captain Torres is in her office," Jenkins said, handing the ID back. "You'll need to take him to her." Walsh stiffened. Captain Elena Torres was a force of nature, tough, fair, and a stickler for procedure. He hadn't planned on involving her so soon, but there was no avoiding it now. "All right," he said, his voice tight. He gripped Jamal's arm, leading him toward Torres's office, ignoring the curious glances from other officers. The crowd outside was growing louder, their chants filtering through the precinct's walls. Sarah watched them go, her mind racing. She'd joined the force to make a difference, inspired by her parents' stories of overcoming prejudice as immigrants. But moments like this made her question everything: her training, her colleagues, herself. She pulled out her phone, seeing Mia's video already trending, the comments a mix of anger and calls for justice. Something big was happening, and Sarah felt caught in the middle. Jamal, meanwhile, kept his expression neutral as they approached Torres's office. He knew the system and knew how quickly things could spiral, but he also knew his power. As a DA agent, he'd faced worse than Walsh: cartel enforcers, corrupt officials. But this was different. This wasn't about crime. It was about who he was, or rather who Walsh assumed he was. The door to Torres's office loomed ahead, and Jamal braced himself for what was next. Walsh knocked, then opened the door when Torres's voice called out, "Come in." The office was orderly, with a large desk covered in neatly stacked files and a shelf of law enforcement manuals. Captain Elena Torres, a woman in her mid-40s with sharp eyes and a no-nonsense demeanor, looked up from her paperwork. Her dark hair was streaked with gray, and her uniform was impeccable, a testament to her disciplined approach. "Officer Walsh," she said, her tone neutral. "What's this about?" "Caught this guy in the park, Captain," Walsh said, guiding Jamal into the room. "Acting suspicious, wouldn't cooperate when I asked for ID." Torres's gaze shifted to Jamal, and for a split second, her eyes widened in recognition. She knew who he was. Jamal Carter, one of the DEA's top agents, respected across agencies. But she masked it quickly, her expression professional. "Is that so?" she said, leaning back in her chair. "And what exactly was suspicious about his behavior?" Jamal met her eyes, seeing the recognition there, and gave a slight nod, trusting her to handle this carefully. Walsh hesitated, feeling the ground shift beneath him. "He was alone, just sitting there," he said, the words sounding weaker now. "He fits the description of a suspect we're looking for." Torres's eyes narrowed. "And did you have probable cause to arrest him?" Walsh faltered, his confidence cracking. "He wouldn't cooperate, Captain," he repeated, though it sounded hollow even to him. Torres leaned forward, her voice firm. "Officer Walsh, step outside. I'd like to speak with Mr. Carter alone." Walsh blinked, caught off guard, but Torres's tone left no room for argument. Reluctantly, he released Jamal's arm and stepped out, the door closing behind him with a soft click. The chants from the protesters outside echoed faintly, a reminder of the storm brewing beyond the precinct's walls. Torres's demeanor softened slightly as she turned to Jamal. "Mr. Carter, I apologize for this. I know who you are." Jamal allowed himself a small smile. "No need to apologize, Captain. You're just doing your job." Torres sighed, glancing at the closed door. "I'm aware of your status, but I'd appreciate it if we kept that quiet for now. I need to handle this carefully." "Of course," Jamal said, rubbing his wrists where the cuffs had left red marks. "I'm not here to cause trouble. I just want to make sure this is handled properly." "It will be," Torres assured him. "I'll speak with Walsh and start an investigation. But I have to ask, why didn't you tell him who you were right away?" Jamal's smile faded, his expression serious. "Because it shouldn't matter, Captain. My badge shouldn't be the reason I'm treated with respect." Torres nodded, understanding the weight of his words. "You're right. It shouldn't. But unfortunately, it does for some." She paused, then added, "I'll call Walsh back in, and we'll resolve this." Jamal nodded, watching as Torres moved to the door. The confrontation wasn't over, but he knew he had the upper hand now. The truth would come out, and Walsh would face the consequences of his actions. Outside, the protesters' voices grew louder, Mia's video fueling their anger, a spark that was quickly becoming a fire. Torres opened the door, and Walsh stepped back inside, his expression wary. He could sense the shift in the room, though he didn't know why. "Mr. Carter is not the man you were looking for," Torres said firmly. "Release him immediately." Walsh blinked, the words sinking in slowly. "What? But Captain—" "Immediately," Torres repeated, her voice cutting through his protest. Walsh hesitated, then reached for his keys, his hands trembling slightly as he unlocked Jamal's cuffs. The realization of his mistake was beginning to dawn, a cold dread settling in his chest. Jamal rubbed his wrists, giving Walsh a measured look. "Thank you, officer," he said, his tone calm, but carrying an undertone of finality. Walsh swallowed hard, unable to meet Jamal's eyes. "You're free to go," he muttered, stepping back. Jamal turned to Torres. "I'll be in touch." "Captain, there's still a lot to discuss." Torres nodded, understanding the weight behind his words. "I look forward to it, Mr. Carter." With that, Jamal walked out of the office, the protesters' chants following him as he stepped into the precinct's main hall. Sarah watched him go, her mind racing with questions. The viral video, the crowd outside, the tension in the precinct, it was all too much, too fast. She glanced at her phone again, seeing the hashtag #DH Justice for Jamal trending nationwide. Something had been set in motion, something bigger than any of them, and Sarah knew she couldn't stay silent any longer. As Jamal stepped outside, the crowd's cheers greeted him, Mia's voice rising above the rest. "We see you!" she shouted, holding up her phone, still filming. Jamal gave her a nod, a silent acknowledgement of her courage. He walked away from the precinct, the sun still high in the sky, but the weight of the day pressed heavily on his shoulders. This wasn't just about him. It was about every person who'd been judged, cuffed, or worse, for the color of their skin. And as the city burned with outrage, Jamal knew this was only the beginning. The precinct was a hive of controlled chaos, its usual hum of activity drowned out by the roar of protesters outside, their chants of "no justice, no peace," seeping through the brick walls like a heartbeat. Captain Elena Torres sat at her desk, the glow of her computer screen casting harsh shadows across her face as she replayed the viral video of Jamal Carter's detention for what felt like the 100th time. The footage was damning. Officer Daniel Walsh's aggressive posture, his hand on his holster, the way he ignored Jamal's calm explanations, cuffing him in front of a growing crowd at Liberty Park. The caption, "Justice for Jamal," blinked at. The bottom, now shared thousands of times across the city and beyond. Elena, a woman who'd climbed the ranks through grit and an unyielding commitment to fairness, knew this wasn't just a public relations crisis. It was a moral failing, a crack in the foundation of the department she'd sworn to uphold. She rubbed her temples, the weight of her captain's badge heavier than ever, and called for an immediate internal review. Her first move was to assign Officer Sarah Lin, the rookie who'd witnessed the incident, to assist with the investigation. Sarah's fresh perspective might uncover truths the veterans were too entrenched to see, Elena hoped, though she knew the road ahead would be fraught. Sarah Lin stood in the precinct's records room surrounded by towering shelves of files, her hands trembling slightly as she pulled complaint logs from the past decade. At 24, with just 3 months on the force, she was still finding her footing, her Asian American heritage, making her both an insider and an outsider in the department's predominantly white culture. She'd seen Walsh approach Jamal in the park, had felt the wrongness of it in her gut, but hadn't spoken up, a silence that now gnawed at her. The body cam footage, which she'd reviewed that morning, was unambiguous. Walsh's voice sharp, his movements aggressive, Jamal's calm responses ignored. Sarah's task was to cross-reference witness statements. "Yes, Captain," Walsh replied, his voice low but steady, though his hands fidgeted under the table. He glanced at Jamal, who met his gaze with that same unnerving calmness and quickly looked away. "Let's start with your report," Torres said, sliding a file across the table. "You stated you detained Mr. Carter because he matched a suspect description. Can you elaborate?" Walsh cleared his throat, his mind racing for the right words. "I saw a man in the park, alone, acting suspiciously. He fit the description. We had black male, medium build, 30s or 40s. I approached him, asked for ID, and he was evasive." "Evasive how?" Ramirez pressed, his pen poised over a notepad. "He didn't show his ID right away," Walsh said, his voice growing defensive. "He questioned me, seemed like he was hiding something." Jamal's voice cut through, calm but firm. I was sketching, Officer Walsh. I asked if I was under arrest because I knew my rights. That's not evasion, it's clarity, Altesse. Flinched, his face reddening. I was doing my job, Captain, he said, turning to Torres. We're trained to be cautious, to assume someone might be dangerous until proven otherwise. Torres's eyes narrowed. And did you find anything on Mr. Carter to indicate he was involved in criminal activity? Walsh hesitated, his confidence cracking. No, ma'am, he was clean. A heavy silence filled the room. Ramirez spoke next, his tone pointed. Officer Walsh, did it occur to you that your assumptions might have been influenced by factors other than protocol? By Mr. Carter's race, for instance? Walsh's throat tightened, the question hitting like a blade. I didn't mean to profile him, he said, his voice faltering. I was just following my training. Jamal leaned forward, his gaze steady. Your job is to protect and serve, Officer Walsh, not to judge people based on their appearance. I told you I was a DEA agent, but you didn't listen. Why? Walsh opened his mouth to respond, but no words came. The room felt smaller, the air thicker, as the reality of his actions pressed down on him. Sarah, watching silently, scribbled in her notebook, her heart pounding. She wanted to speak, to share what she'd found in the files, but it wasn't her moment. Not yet. Torres cleared her throat, drawing attention back to her. This review isn't just about what happened, Officer Walsh. It's about the mindset that led to it. We need to ensure every officer upholds fairness and justice. This isn't just about you. It's about the integrity of this department. I see you. Nodded, his voice barely above a whisper. I understand, Captain. The meeting adjourned, but the tension lingered. Torres pulled Sarah aside afterward, her expression serious. Keep digging, Lin. If there's a pattern, we need to know how deep it goes. Sarah nodded, her resolve hardening. She was starting to see the precinct not as a monolith, but as a fractured system, one she might help rebuild. That evening, Sarah met Jamal at a coffee shop near the precinct, a neutral ground away from the chaos. The place was quiet, the hum of espresso machines a soft backdrop. Jamal sipped a black coffee, his sketchbook open to a half-finished drawing of the park. You found something, didn't you? He asked, his eyes meeting hers. Sarah hesitated, then nodded. Complaints against Walsh, going back years. All dismissed. It's like the department protected him. Jamal's expression didn't change, but his voice carried weight. That's the system I'm talking about. It's not just one officer. It's the culture that lets him slide. What are you going to do about it? Sarah swallowed, her hands tightening around her cup. I want to help change it. But I'm just a rookie. I don't know if anyone will. Listen. They'll listen if you make them, Jamal said. You've got evidence. Use it. Their conversation was cut short by Sarah's phone buzzing, a news alert. The protests had grown, with Mia leading a rally outside City Hall, demanding Walsh's suspension and broader reforms. The video was now on national networks, with pundits debating police bias. Sarah looked at Jamal, a spark of determination in her eyes. I'm in, she said. Let's do this. Meanwhile, Walsh sat alone in his apartment, the TV muted, but showing the protest footage. The viral video played again, his voice barking orders, Jamal's calm responses ignored. For the first time, Walsh saw himself as others did, aggressive, prejudiced, wrong. He turned off the TV, the silence deafening, and buried his face in his hands. The chants from the protests echoed in his mind, each one a reminder of the mistake. That might cost him everything. Outside, Mia's rally swelled, her megaphone amplifying her voice. We're not just here for Jamal Carter, she shouted. We're here for every person who's been profiled, arrested, or worse because of their skin. This stops now. The crowd roared, signs waving, cameras flashing. Mia felt the weight. of her role, but also its power. She wasn't just a high schooler anymore. She was a voice, a spark, and she wasn't backing down. Back at the precinct, Torres stood at her office window, watching the crowd. She knew suspending Walsh was just the start. The investigation would uncover more than one officer's mistakes. It would expose the cracks in the system she'd spent her career upholding. She turned to her desk where Sarah's files lay and steeled herself for the fight ahead. The city was watching, and so was Jamal Carter, a man who'd turned a moment of injustice into a call for change. 4 months had passed since the incident in Liberty Park, and the city still hummed with the aftershocks of Jamal Carter's wrongful detention. The precinct, once a fortress of routine, now felt like a crucible, its walls bearing the weight of change and resistance. Captain Elena Torres stood in the briefing room, her sharp eyes scanning the officers before her, some eager, others skeptical, as she outlined the new training protocols on racial bias and de-escalation. The air was thick with unspoken tension, a mix of hope and defiance. Outside, the city was quieter now, but the echoes of protests lingered, fueled by Mia Torres's viral video, which had become a rallying cry for reform. Jamal Carter, the DA, agent at the center of it all, had returned to collaborate with Elena, his presence a reminder of the stakes. Officer Sarah Lin, no longer just a rookie, led a task force to revise training, her resolve hardened by the truths she'd uncovered. And Daniel Walsh, stripped of his badge, grappled with his new reality, his life upended by a single prejudiced decision. The path forward was uncertain, but the precinct and the city was at a turning point, and every step mattered. Elena's voice was steady as she addressed the room, her uniform crisp, her captain's insignia glinting under the fluorescent lights. "These training modules aren't optional," she said, her tone leaving no room for argument. "Every officer will complete them, from rookies to veterans. We're here to serve the community, not to judge it." Her words were met with nods, from some like Sarah, who stood at the back, her notebook filled with ideas for the task force. But others, like Officer Malone, a grizzled veteran with 20 years on the force, crossed his arms, his expression sour. "This is just politics," he muttered to the officer beside him, loud enough for Sarah to hear. "We're cops, not social workers." Sarah's jaw tightened, but she stayed silent, knowing the real fight wasn't in this room. It was in the changes they'd implement or fail to. Across town, Jamal Carter sat in a community center, his sketchbook open on a folding table, a half-finished drawing of Liberty Park under his pencil. He'd agreed to advise Elena on the precinct's reforms, not because he wanted recognition, but because he believed in the possibility of a better system. The room buzzed with community leaders, activists, and residents, all gathered to plan a town hall meeting, a chance for the precinct and the public to confront the past and chart a future. Mia Torres, now a recognized voice in the city's activist circles, stood at the front, her energy undimmed. At 18, she'd transformed from a high schooler with a phone to a leader, her Takes a Justice for Jamal campaign sparking citywide conversations. "This town hall isn't just talk," she said, her voice carrying over the murmurs. "It's about holding the police accountable and making sure what happened to Mr. Carter never happens again." Jamal gave her a nod, impressed by her fire. He'd met her a few times since the incident, and each time her determination reminded him why he was still here, still fighting. Sarah, meanwhile, was in the precinct's records room poring over training manuals with her task force, a mix of young officers and a few open-minded veterans. The complaints she'd uncovered against Walsh had exposed a deeper rot, a culture that shielded biased officers, dismissing community concerns as misunderstandings. Her task force was rewriting protocols, emphasizing de-escalation and cultural sensitivity, but resistance was fierce. Malone and his allies argued the changes were soft, undermining their authority. Sarah, though, was undeterred. As an Asian American, she'd felt the sting of being underestimated in the precinct, her ideas dismissed as rookie idealism. But Jamal's words from their coffee shop meeting echoed in her mind. They'll listen if you make them. She pushed her team to incorporate community feedback, inviting Mia and other activists to review drafts. It was slow, grueling work, but Sarah saw it as a step toward the department she'd joined to build. Daniel Walsh, no longer Officer Walsh, stood outside a community center across town, a cardboard box of his belongings still unpacked in his car. His termination had been finalized weeks ago. The investigation's findings, body cam footage, witness statements, Sarah's uncovered complaints, leaving no room for appeal. He'd been ordered to Back at the precinct, Elena met with Jamal in her office, the walls now adorned with charts outlining the new training programs. "We're rolling out the first modules next week," she said, handing him a draft. "De-escalation, bias recognition, community engagement. Your input's been invaluable." Jamal scanned the document, nodding. "It's a start, but it's only as good as the officers who follow it. You've got pushback, don't you?" Elena sighed, her expression wary. "More than I'd like. Some see this as bowing to public pressure, not progress. But I'm not backing down." Jamal respected her resolve, seeing in her the same determination he'd felt after the incident. "You've got allies," he said, thinking of Sarah and Mia. "Build on that." Their conversation was interrupted by a knock. Sarah, her face flushed with urgency. "Captain, we've got a problem. There's a protest planned for tonight outside the precinct. It's not Mia's group, it's more volatile. They're calling for Walsh's arrest, not just his firing." Elena's jaw tightened. The city was a powder keg, and this could light the fuse. That night the precinct was surrounded by a crowd of nearly 100, their chants louder, angrier than Mia's organized rallies. Sarah, in uniform, stood at the perimeter with other officers, her heart pounding. The protesters weren't just demanding justice. They were furious, some throwing bottles, others waving signs with Walsh's face crossed out. Elena had ordered a soft response, emphasizing de-escalation, but Sarah could see the strain on her colleagues' faces, some itching to push back. She spotted Mia in the crowd, trying to calm the more aggressive protesters, her megaphone struggling against the noise. "This isn't the way," Mia shouted, but her voice was drowned out by a chant. "Lock him up!" Sarah moved toward her, hoping to prevent escalation, when a bottle sailed past, shattering near her feet. Instinctively, she raised her hands, signaling calm, and called out, "We hear you. Let's talk." To her surprise, a few protesters paused, and Mia seized the moment, redirecting the crowd's energy into a chant for reform, not violence. The tension eased, but only slightly, and Sarah realized how fragile this balance was. The next evening, the town hall filled the community center, its folding chairs packed with residents, officers, and reporters. Elena stood at the podium, her voice steady but heavy. "We're here to listen, to learn, and to rebuild trust," she said, her eyes scanning the diverse crowd, families, activists, skeptics. Jamal sat near the front, his sketchbook closed, his presence commanding quiet, respect. Sarah was beside him, her task force's proposals ready to present. Walsh, in plain clothes, sat at the back, his face drawn, every eye in the room seeming to bore into him. Mia took the stage first, her voice clear despite her nerves. "What happened to Mr. Carter wasn't just one cop's mistake," she said, her eyes locking on Walsh for a moment. It's a system that lets those mistakes happen over and over. We need training, oversight, and accountability. Not tomorrow, but now. The crowd murmured in agreement, some clapping, others shouting support. Sarah spoke next, outlining the task force's plans. Mandatory bias training, community advisory boards, and stricter complaint reviews. Her voice shook at first but grew, stronger as she saw Jamal's nod of approval. "We're not perfect," she admitted, "but we're committed to doing better." The room was split. Some officers nodded, others, like Malone, stared at the floor, unconvinced. Then, to everyone's surprise, Walsh stood, his hands trembling as he approached the microphone. The room fell silent, the air electric with anticipation. I made a mistake," he said, his voice low, cracking. "I saw Mr. Carter and assumed the worst, not because of evidence, but because of me, my biases. I'm not a cop anymore, and I don't know how to fix this, but I'm here to listen." His words hung in the air, raw and unguarded. Some in the crowd scoffed, others leaned forward, intrigued. Mia, standing nearby, spoke up. "It's not enough to say sorry," she said, her voice firm but not cruel. "You need to understand the harm you caused, not just to Mr. Carter, but to all of us who feel unsafe because of officers like you." Walsh nodded, his shoulders slumping, the weight of her words sinking in. Jamal took the stage last, his presence commanding silence. "This isn't about me," he said, echoing his earlier words to Elena. "It's about the next person who sits in a park, walks down a street, or just exists while Black, Latino, or anyone else targeted by bias. We need a system that sees people, not stereotypes." He outlined his vision: community-led oversight, transparent investigations, officers trained to question their instincts. The crowd erupted in applause, but Jamal's eyes were on Walsh, who met his gaze for the first time, a flicker of understanding passing between them. The town hall ended with a commitment from Elena to implement the task force's reforms, with Jamal and Mia as advisors. But as the crowd dispersed, a new protest brewed outside, less organized, more volatile. Sarah, now leading the precinct's response, used the new de-escalation tactics, directing officers to engage calmly, listen, and avoid force. The protest diffused a small victory that earned cautious praise from Mia's group. It wasn't perfect, but it was progress. Weeks later, Jamal returned to Liberty Park, his sketchbook open to a new page. The kite he'd drawn months ago was complete, its red tail vibrant against the paper sky. He watched children play, their laughter a reminder of why he'd stayed in this fight. Sarah, now mentoring recruits, visited the park on her break, spotting Jamal and joining him. "We're making headway," she said, her voice hopeful. "The first training module went well, and the community board's taking shape." Jamal smiled, his pencil pausing. "It's a start. Keep pushing." Across town, Walsh volunteered at the community center, helping with a youth program, his formal uniform replaced by jeans and a t-shirt. He was still grappling with his past, but Mia's words at the town hall echoed, "Understand the harm." He was trying, one step at a time. The city felt different now, not healed but hopeful, its scars a reminder of the work ahead. Elena, in her office, signed off on the first community oversight agreement, her pen steady despite the challenges she knew would come. Mia, preparing for college, continued her activism, her phone now a tool for organizing, not just filming. And Jamal, sketching under the oak tree, felt a glimmer of peace, knowing the path forward was long but possible. Change was coming, and they were all part of it, each step a testament to the power of confronting truth, no matter how hard.